you look at this second question, and oh, cool, let's get that bigger. That's better. So the second question is summarize and evaluate the key points from these two texts. And the first text says the announcement by Aubrey de Grey that the first person to reach the age of 1,000 is certainly alive today was instantly shot down by numerous scholars. Yes, undoubtedly, people in the developed world are living longer, but are the dreams of living forever that have been a mainstay of popular culture and science fiction now becoming fact? Only a couple of decades ago, postponing aging would have been seen as a wacky idea. Yet some now argue that, far from being a mere fantasy, the notion that humanity could one day hold the key to eternity is actually a distinct possibility. Okay, so there's one perspective. I find that a little bit ridiculous, personally, but of course, we just need to summarize and evaluate. So I personally would summarize that and then explain why I find it ridiculous, and that's my evaluation. Yeah, and now the second one is outliving the world. In an overpopulated and under-resourced world, who in their right mind would choose to throw immortality into the mix? Whilst anti-aging crusaders strive to pursue longevity, there are growing numbers of people seeking to ban research into unnaturally prolonging life. In the face of the strain our society is already placed under from a growing population, there is a vast array of ethical, moral, and ecological grounds on which to oppose such research. The finite nature of humanity should be seen as a blessing, not a challenge to overcome, lest we risk playing God in our own world. So clearly this point of view is very critical of the idea of prolonging life, and certainly of eternal life. But I think that eternal life is a little bit ridiculous. Anyway, these are the two texts that need to be summarized and evaluated. So let's have a look. I have to say as well that I think that this is already a more difficult question than the previous question. And it's just because there are more complex issues involved here. It's actually quite a lot of difficult themes and topics. I think the one on home was a little bit easier. And I think it was easier to take a simple approach to the other question. And that's a simple approach is often good. Yeah, remember that when you overcomplicate things, things become obscure, they become vague, they become unclear. Okay, so let's have a look at the essay now. I'm going to have to stop sharing and start sharing again. Let's have a look, stop screen sharing and start screen sharing. And it's this one here. Okay, so, oh no, it's not this one, sorry. Let's get rid of that. Oh, so, let's get rid of that and put up the other one. There it is, Tragedy or Necessity, this one's called. And as you can see, this one is a lot, where is it? Okay, there it is. This one is a lot more serious, yeah, and certainly a lot more philosophical, because these are more philosophical themes. So, tragedy or necessity. We all die, that's fine, or we will all die, that's fine. Both correct here. I just felt like the we all die was more hard-hitting, personally. And so I'm only suggesting it, but I don't want to say that it's necessary. That's fine. We will all die. I just think we all die sounds more timeless as well, yeah? The idea of we will all die, that's only really applying to everybody now, but us guys, the ones you're talking to. But if you say we all die, then that means everybody that's ever been born and that ever will be born. And I think that that's more what perhaps you want to say. But anyway, we will all die. This sounds more realistic than dramatic, yet much as the wise are advocating restrictions on research into immortality, comma, good. The light-hearted are looking for a magic pill to prolong lifespan. That's a good sentence. Shame about the mistakes with the articles, but that's a very good sentence. I like the comparison. Much as X, yeah, much as the wise are X, the light-hearted are Y, yeah? And you've got the same tense, are advocating, are looking, and so it's all nicely in parallel. And I like the wise, the light-hearted. Why not? It sounds good to me. The two texts juxtapose the tendency of modern society to increase life expectancy and the natural necessity to die. That's a very good intro. I like it. It's interesting, good language, and very few mistakes. Now, why did I change it to this? I've mentioned this before in other classes. Is there a noun here that the it refers to? No. Yeah, it is usually used to replace nouns. Please use the word this if you are referring to the whole clause. This can stand in for a whole clause. It doesn't. And so that's why this sounds much better here if you're referring to the fact that we all die, and I assume the student was. This sounds much better than the pronoun it. Yeah, I hope that's clear. Because I've mentioned it before, and I want to keep repeating. I want to keep correcting any mistakes that crop up regularly, especially when they're cropping up from lots of different students. So please be aware that it for nouns and this for clauses. Yet, much as we've done that bit, and so we don't use an article before research into immortality because we mean research into immortality in general. We mean all research into immortality, and to prolong lifespan. We don't mean one particular lifespan, someone's lifespan, the lifespan of a species, the lifespan of a rat or the lifespan of a tiger. We're not being specific. We just mean to prolong lifespan. So no articles. Okay, let's look at the main body. And I did think, by that, I want to quickly say that the conclusion and the intro were very good here. I feel as though the main body has the main weaknesses, and it's simply because concrete examples, and we'll see this now. So the first text emphasizes the feasible prospect that a person could live a much longer life than we have been enjoying so far. So we would need a the here because this is very definite. What kind of prospect? The feasible prospect that a person could live to much longer than we do. Yeah, and I would say we do rather than we have been enjoying so far. I think it's just shorter and sweeter, and quite often shorter and sweeter is clearer. So the first text emphasizes the feasible prospect must be the, because we're defining now what feasible prospect. We use a defining relative clause to define which feasible prospect. So it's got to be the feasible prospect that a person could live much longer than we do. Yeah. And okay, you can use we, there's nothing wrong with using we, but it does suddenly bring in a different pronoun than a person. A person is he or she. And so it seems to me a bit strange to compare that a person could live a much longer life than we do. I mean, it's possible, it's okay. I don't want to complain about it, but maybe it's better to say that a person could live a much longer life than other people have been enjoying so far, because then you're comparing a person to other people. It just seems more logical to me to compare one person living a much longer life than another person is living at the moment. But I mean, it's not necessary. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with than we have been enjoying so far. Those who claim that this idea does not have a leg to stand on. Now, I'm afraid this is an idiomatic piece of English, and most of the idiomatic English that the student has used has been entirely appropriate. And so I don't want to have a go at the student because most of the language really is entirely appropriate, but this one isn't. And it's because usually it's people rather than ideas that don't have a leg to stand on. You would say something like the witness, or maybe not, let's say the defendant won't have a leg to stand on because there was so much evidence against him. And so when he appears in court, he won't have a leg to stand on. And by the way, it is usually a legal expression, this. It's normally used for law. I haven't ever heard it being used with this theory doesn't have a leg to stand on or this idea. Never. It's only people that don't have a leg to stand on. So be careful with using new phrases. Make sure you're using them correctly. Okay, not only do cutting edge technologies work magic, but also state-of-the-art medicine is exceeding expectations. Good, that's a good sentence. And it sets you up, it allows you now to tell the reader exactly what kind of cutting edge technologies and what kind of state-of-the-art medicine is improving health, is prolonging life expectancy, because there's lots of stuff you could use here. And if you don't put concrete examples now, then it's going to sound vague. It's going to sound like it's going to leave the reader thinking, what cutting edge technology, what state of the art medicine? And if you don't provide that answer. There's nothing to persuade the reader that you're right. And this is why concrete examples are important. Yeah, you need to use concrete examples here, and it will help. It will show that you are evaluating the first text and not just summarizing the first text. Without concrete examples, you're basically just summarizing what they've said, but you do need to evaluate. And so please use concrete examples. I don't know, organ donation. Yeah, that's one example of how maybe medicine is helping to prolong life. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's your essay still, so you should decide what's a good idea, what kind of examples are good examples to use, but please use some. Otherwise, I'm just left thinking, well, what cutting edge technology? Yeah, it could be anything. What state of the art medicine? Could be anything. Yeah. Okay. Conversely, the second text stresses the menacing nature of such a prospect, pointing out that scarce natural resources are insufficient to provide for an overpopulated planet. Additionally, a changing course, that's a set expression, I'm afraid. When a boat changes course, we say a changing course, or the boat changes course. So a changing course can entail new social and behavioral problems. Now, notice that that's a good sentence, again, for summarizing, but it's not a good sentence for evaluating. It's a good sentence in the sense that, yeah, the first text says that. But if you start to provide concrete examples of what kind of changing course you mean, because I don't know what changing course you mean, and what kind of social problems, what kind of behavioral problems, then you are evaluating and not just summarizing. Yeah. And so please, concrete examples here. Without the concrete examples, once again, that sounds very vague to me. I think, well, a changing course, what changing course? And what social and behavioral problems? Let's be specific. Yeah. In my opinion, there is a grain of truth in the idea expressed in the first text. Indeed, the technological breakthrough, which one? Of the most recent decades and not of the latest decades. We do say the most recent decades, has turned a miracle. What miracle? Into a reality. You've got to explain what you're talking about here. Otherwise, it does remain vague. Yeah. And again, what we really need here is concrete examples, and all you've got to tell me is what technological breakthrough. I'm dying to know. I really am. Because without it, I can't see how you've evaluated the text. I can't see what your judgment is. And so I need an example. So, however, I can hardly support, remember what we've said about hardly, you can't say hardly can I support. I can hardly support, and the adverb goes between the can and the support, just like can also support, the idea of transforming people into Duncan MacLeods. Now, please don't assume that the examiner has watched the film The Highlander. Not everyone has. I have. It's a good film, but not everyone has. And if you mention somebody that they don't know, that they've never heard of, and I think you're on. I really do. Have is from popular. However, it's not got anything to do with the text about the technology. That has been a miracle. Version with the conditional, were we not to make space for offspring, you can't say offsprings, our lives would be deprived of any sense because the for the lesson. I was in time for the class. It's on time that doesn't have an object. But I mean, even on time here, I'd think, well, on time in what sense? On time for God to take us into heaven? Or, you know, it's not clear. And so avoid vague expressions. We don't need it here, basically. I think we can just say we need to leave the world since natural resources are limited. Now, if you say there are limits to natural resources, please be aware that that's different from natural resources are limited. If you say there is a limit to gas, surely you mean there is a limit to the amount of gas found in the ground. And so you've got to say it like that and not there is a limit to gas, which doesn't really mean much. And so I would change this to natural resources are limited and our children may face an acute shortage. Well, again, this is your chance to include concrete examples. This is where I want you to elaborate. Yeah, you can explain what kind of natural resources are likely to run out in the future, what kind of natural resources our children will have to live without, yeah, if we have this immortality. Yeah, if nobody dies, what kind of natural resources are most likely to run out first? And the reason I want you to say it is because as soon as you start mentioning concrete natural resources, it ties your argument down to the ground. Yeah, it ties your argument to reality, and it makes it more persuasive. It makes it a better essay. So this was another chance to use concrete examples, and I did feel as though the main body here, the only concrete example I could find really was Duncan MacLeod, and I didn't think that that's really what we needed here. Much better to focus on technological breakthroughs and state-of-the-art medicine and cutting-edge technologies, which are all great language, but I want to see examples. I want to know what you're talking about. Okay, so to conclude, life prolongation is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the temptation to become immortal seems seductive, but on the other hand, it is ruinous for humanity. Consequently, again, an incorrect use of hardly here, death hardly sounds tragic. We have to embrace this natural outcome. Good conclusion and good introduction, but the main body needs concrete examples. It will help to evaluate both of the arguments. I feel as though you've summarized both texts, but you could have evaluated them better by including specific examples of what state-of-the-art medicine is prolonging life. And of course, there's lots you can mention, lots and lots of different things you can mention, but do mention something concrete. And I think in the second one, you could have mentioned what natural resources are limited, what our children may have to live without, and it will make your argument stronger. Apart from that, I think that the structure is good, the organization is good. Some of the language was a little bit off. For example, be careful with hardly, be careful with this expression, it's people that don't have a leg to stand on. So some of the language was a little bit off. And there weren't too many mistakes, really, but it was hardly that kept on coming up as a mistake. Most of it's actually very clear, very easy to read. Okay, so that's all we're going to see. Oh, I haven't just been... have I been looking at that without without showing you the screen? I'm sorry if I have. Let's share in that window. Okay, well, we'll leave it there because I'm not sure that has worked anyway. Hopefully it's worked. Fingers crossed, guys. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to hang around perhaps, or I'll be around a little bit later to do one more essay maybe if I get time. But thanks everybody for watching. Hope to see you all soon.